Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we will be discussing some books that I finished recently. So these are going to be recent reads numbers 57 through 61 that I have read in 2018. I cannot believe the year is almost over. At least I feel really happy and really like I've accomplished something because I've already met my Goodreads goal of reading 60 years. I've already met and surpassed that goal. So that's pretty wonderful for me considering all the academic reading that I've had to do on the side, and not just reading, but all the extra academic work that I've had to do this year, especially last semester. I've been really busy, and just it's been quite a chaotic endeavor to find the time to read, to dedicate some time to reading, and still do the things that I like. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about some books. So the first one was technically something that I read for academic purposes. I read it for my Freud seminar, but I decided to include it here because it really felt like I was reading something for my own pleasure as well. It was wonderful. So this was, like I said, a text that we read for the Freud seminar that I am taking. And this is one of those cases that Freud wrote about of one of his patients. So Sigmund Freud, of course, saw a lot of patients, and he wrote maybe something about some of them, but there are 5 important cases, some 5 clinical texts that Freud has about 5 of his patients that really helped him start to think about certain topics. And this is one of them. This is Dora. She's known as Dora, although her real name was Ida Bauer. It's a case of hysteria. It's a case of conversions. It's a case of family drama, family intrigues and secrets and repressed sexuality. It read like a novel. It was fun and exciting, like reading a novel. So that's why I am also including it here, not just as an academic text. And the next book that I have on this list is another one of those cases that we read for class. This is this has been my favorite so far. This is called Little Hans. Little Hans, whose real name was Herbert Graf, was a 4 or 5-year-old boy, and it's a weird case because Freud was not the analyst of this boy. He was not directly in contact with the boy. However, the boy's father was the analyst. So the father, Max Graf, decided to start analyzing his little boy, little Hans. And this was a very common practice back in the day because there were not very many analysts. So, he had to do it himself. And so he decided to take this upon himself and start analyzing this little boy because he started developing a really incredibly paralyzing phobia to horses. And of course, back then, having a phobia to horses was a very paralyzing thing, considering this was a very wealthy family living in Vienna, and there were horses and carriages everywhere. So it was a big deal. And so the father had to, he decided to start treating his son. And he would write to Freud. Telling him about little Hans and what he was saying and what he was doing. And it was through that material, through those letters, that the father sent to Freud, relating the son's fantasies, ideas, what he did, what he said, what he dreamed, all of that. It was that Freud started to supervise or help the... What is happening? Did that door just open itself? Ay, ¿qué pasó? Sabía que eras tú, mi chiqui. ¿Qué haces aquí, mi rey? Someone's here. What are you doing here? You just barged in. You almost gave me a heart attack. Gonzalo, mi amor chiquito precioso. Te puedes quedar aquí. Ya voy a acabar. Sorry for that interruption. So anyway, where was I? Little Hans. So it was Freud who sort of, he wasn't the analyst, but he did credit himself as a supervising co-analyst, if you will. And it's a wonderful case. If you ever want to read something that Freud wrote, even if you're not really into Freud, but you just want to read something to understand the way that Freud thought about the human mind and about childhood and all these things, this is the one that I would recommend the most. It's incredibly funny. Little Hans is a wonderful character, so lovely and charming. It was wonderful. And I had the great pleasure of reading those two cases by Freud with like I said, I'm reading it in class, in a seminar, and our teacher is one of those analysts who, it's just incredible the way that their mind works. He is, in my opinion, the best and most knowledgeable analyst in terms of Freud. He's the best and the most valuable Freud historian and scholar that I've ever met. And I am so grateful I really appreciate it very much that I could take this seminar with this teacher, because he's been teaching this class for over 25 years and he's like the real deal. So it was really enriching. Now, the next book that I read also has to do with Freud, but this is very, very different. This is not serious. It is not academic. It's quite the contrary. This is written in Spanish. It is a biography of Freud. The title is in Spanish, Sigmund Freud, Vida y Milagros. Sigmund Freud, A Life and Miracles. It was written by Argentinian writer and comedian and former psychoanalyst Rudy. And it's a wonderfully whimsical, hilarious, creative, and playful biography of Freud. It's a great summary of his theories, of his ideas, and the way that he started to think about certain things. It's a book about controversy. It's a book that is so playful and completely delightful. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I think it will be in my favorites of the year list. Then the next book that I read, book 60, was The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, book number 3 in The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've already posted a review of this, which, I was driving during that review, so I don't know if I was really all that coherent. But I really loved this book. I think it was the perfect way to end a trilogy. I think this one and The Fellowship of the Ring were incredible jewels. Had it not been for The Two Towers, I probably would have given the series a 5-star rating, The Two Towers was a little bit lazily written for me. It was a little bit of a chore to get through. But The Return of the King was perfect. I really loved how biblical it felt, which is something that I said about The Fellowship of the Ring as well. I love how these texts don't feel like fiction. They don't feel like novels. They don't feel made up or fictitious. They just feel biblical and like real lore, like real folklore, like you are reading an actual legend or myth or something that is not a novel. It feels real and historical. It's a mix of history and anthropology, and I think that's mainly due to Tolkien's great efforts in creating this world and these cultures as well as he did. So I loved this as a conclusion. In particular, I thought it was the perfect way to end a trilogy. I gave it 4 or 5 stars. I'm not sure. I think I will give it like a 4.5 stars. But overall, I would give 4 stars to The Lord of the Rings, the complete trilogy. And finally, the book that I finished this morning was Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. I thought this book was just absolutely incredible and remarkable. I'd had this book for quite some time, and for some weird reason that I couldn't really articulate myself, I was just postponing it, and I just kept avoiding the book, and it was weird because in many ways it was the same relationship that I had to 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a book that I knew was important and was well regarded, and I just felt deep inside of me that this was a book that I could really like, even love. But for some reason, I just was very ambivalent and resistant towards picking it up, and I just kept avoiding it, and I just looked at it on the shelf, and I was like, oh, I know. I just have to wait for the right moment. Someday. So I decided to just stop kidding myself, stop all this weird intellectualization, and I just went ahead and picked it up. And I'm not gonna lie, the first pages were intimidating because, okay, this book is written in a very particular, very weird, unique way. It's hard to explain how this book is written. The structure, the form of the book is one of my favorite parts of the book, actually, but it was not easy to get into at first. It just took a little bit of time for me to really get the hang of it. And once I did, I was just blown away by it. This is exactly the kind of novel that I hoped it would be. It actually exceeded my expectations of it, which was saying a lot. The same thing happened with 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This book is split into three narratives. These are alternating narratives, alternating chapters, or rather alternating perspectives. One of them is this young man from Ukraine, Alex, who is a wonderful character, and he's writing these letters to Jonathan Safran Foer, who is the hero of the novel, who is named after the author himself. So we have these letters that Alex is writing to Jonathan after Jonathan decided to take a trip to the Ukraine to try to discover what happened to this woman, Augustine, who helped his own grandfather escape the Nazis in World War II 50 years ago. So that is the first narrative. The second perspective, is Alex writing the story of what happened during that trip in which Jonathan decided to go to the Ukraine, and Alex is there to help him as a translator. And they also have Alex's own grandfather, and we have another storyline, which is the quest to find this woman, Augustine. And then the last perspective, the third alternating voice, is this weird historical text that Jonathan Safran Foer the character is writing to. It's kind of a history of this shtetl, this Jewish village called Trachenbrod. And that part of the book, that voice, that perspective, reads a lot like 100 Years of Solitude. It's this story of the village, and it feels magical. It feels completely, well, not completely fantastical, but it feels whimsical and like a hyper reality, like a heightened reality. It's weird. It's very difficult to get into that part of the story because it's so weird and it's so whimsical and strange at first. It feels bizarre and it's a little bit jarring, but once you get the hang of it and you get into it, it's so rewarding and so satisfying. And of course, these three perspectives are intertwined, and I'm not going to spoil anything. That's all I'm going to say. but I thought this book was remarkable. I had never read a book that did what this book did to me, and I don't even know what it was. It was heartbreaking and it devastated me, it killed me, but it was also so funny and so human. I don't know. This is a book that I will be thinking a lot about. I've actually started watching a lot of interviews with the author, Jonathan Safran Foer, and I've also watched some videos on YouTube of the teachers and critics and people talking about this book and making an analysis. This is that kind of book that makes you obsess over it and think and think and think. So I absolutely loved it. I enjoyed it. I respected it. I appreciated one of my favorites of the year. Everything is Illuminated, 5 stars. And that's it. Those are all my reviews for today. Thank you very much for watching. I am Just One Reader, and I will see you on the next video.